Hello, everyone. This is your host, C.O.B.R.A number 1, and you are listening to the Barbershop here on COBRAsInAction.org and the Black Talk Radio Network, exposing racism, white supremacy for exactly what it is, so that you and your loved ones can navigate this nasty, stinking, wretched, disgusting system. The purpose of this podcast is to eliminate all confusion in regards to racism and what it is, so that those who are classified as black are no longer confused. We find this show to be necessary because before a problem can be solved, it has to be identified and understood. And too many black people do not understand racism. Visit us at COBRAsInAction.org, a website dedicated to countering racism and replacing it with justice. Also, visit us at peopleofthesunpublishing.com, and please purchase our first publication, Racism is White Supremacy, the pocket guide to counter racism. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and SoundCloud. We're always publishing content to all of our social media sites, so please follow. This is our 7th podcast in the series titled Understanding Racism, White Supremacy, in which we aim to show how racism is present 24 hours, 7 days a week in all non-white people's lives. Today, I will be speaking on war in the system of racism, white supremacy. Do you know that there were probably more deaths in the Holocaust alone than the total number of deaths in wars from the BC period up until the 19th century? We're talking thousands of years here. What happened? We're going to discuss it today here on the Barbershop. Let's take a quick station break, and when we come back, we're going to get into how racism rears its ugly head in the area of human activity known as war. You are listening to the Barbershop here on COBRAsInAction.org and the Black Talk Radio Network. Be back. Before a problem can be solved, it must be understood. And too many black people do not understand racism. Go to www.COBRAsInAction.org today and learn more about racism and how we can solve this problem. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, C.O.B.R.A number 1, and you are listening to the Barbershop here on COBRAsInAction.org and the Black Talk Radio Network. So we're talking about war and the system of racism, white supremacy. Before we get into this, let me say this. Just a quick personal note. Today I am going on an interview for a job, and it has occurred to me, I wrote an article on this about a month ago, that today I will be putting myself on display. Now, like I said, I wrote an article on this about a month ago, how white people, rich white people, have always been in the business of putting black people on display. Excuse me. During slavery, when we first got here in our chains, the first stop, once we came to shore, was to be put up on some platform somewhere where a whole lot of white people could look at us, touch us, tell us, turn around, nigger, bend down, and put their hands all on our butt cheeks, rubbing their nasty, greasy, slimy hands all over us. What were they doing? They were evaluating us. We were put on display for white people, big plantation owners who were interested in having niggers do work on their land for free. They were interested in exploiting Africans, your ancestors. And the same continues today. You go to work and you earn these slave wages. Most of us are barely living. The interview process is the same thing. What feature does this nigger have? What can he do? What can she do? This is what the interview is. White people are always in the business of excluding, finding some reason to exclude, because they are a very hierarchical people. Even when it comes to work, that's what the interview is there for. They're looking to exclude individuals based on what features, what attributes they have. When the correct worldview should be everyone has value and everyone just instinctively, everyone should know to subscribe to the idea that all human beings are capable of doing work, and that there should be no barriers in someone looking to work. But in the system of racism, white supremacy, like I said, these people are hierarchical and they are an exclusive people by nature. They look for reasons to count you out at your expense, regardless of the suffering it causes. So yes, I will be putting myself on display. I'm shining myself up real good, making sure everything is moving right so I can impress the white people who will be evaluating me today. This is unnecessary. This is the system of racism, white supremacy. And this is why it must be changed. Hopefully, with today's show, I will be able to point out to you and convince you that white people are not inherently better leaders than black people, and that white people do not have all the answers, and that these people are not capable of leading all other people on the planet in a constructive manner. All right, let's get into it. So we are talking about war in the system of racism, white supremacy. Before you can understand war in the system, we have to give some perspective. Here are some of the major wars from the ancient world. The Ionian Revolt fought between 499 BC and 493 BC. The Greco-Persian Wars fought between 500 BC and 448 BC. The Peloponnesian War, which began in 431 BC. This war lasted 27 years. The Punic Wars, a series of 3 wars fought between Rome and the city of Carthage, was fought from 264 BC to 146 BC, over a 100-year period. Who are the participants in these wars? There are hundreds and hundreds of wars that have taken place throughout history. I've only named some of the major ones, but who overwhelmingly fought in these wars? With the exception of Nubia and Egypt and the Punic Wars, you are given an impossible task, if ever asked, to find 50 wars in which Africans participated in ancient times. Europeans, on the other hand, not so much so. Just Google, and this is an exercise, just Google ancient African wars then Google ancient European wars, and you will see exactly what I'm saying. On Wikipedia, most of the wars mentioned in Africa were 20th century wars, where Africans were not the instigators, but victims. Europeans, on the other hand, there are accounts of their fighting for every century, and plenty of accounts before Christ as well, BC. Hundreds of wars were fought, and hundreds of thousands perished. But these were mostly European conflicts, white people. What were the casualty numbers in some of these wars? It is estimated that over 400,000 men lost their lives in the First Punic War. Now, this is the war between Rome and Carthage. The Carthaginians, as they were called, lived in the northern part of Africa on the coast. So these people were African. Although in the history books, white people like to use every twist and turn they can to avoid admitting that. But these were African people, and they nearly, over the 100+ years that they fought, that they engaged in battle with Rome, they nearly brought Rome to their knees. All right, but white people do not like to display or show black people or African people in general as having any kind of authority, as having any kind of self-respect, especially as fighting them, people with white skin. They do not like to show that at all or mention that at all, because they don't want you Negroes getting any kind of ideas about raising up and really using all the tools at your disposal to end your oppression, which includes violence. Okay, they want you to continue being good, little passive, puppy dog, nigga Christians. Keep dancing, keep singing, keep jumping, keep crying, keep holding hands. We shall overcome. A white animal goes into a church and kills 9 innocent people. The next day, black people singing, we shall overcome. Holding hands with white people crying, oh man, this is terrible. Oh, this is sad. And then once the showcasing is over, because again, these were Negroes being put on display by all the media networks. Oh, look at these. Oh, they're so Christianly. We should all be like black people. They're so forgiving. Nobody was talking that forgiving crap after 9/11. But anyway, you were put on display. After the displaying, white people went back to their gated communities and you went back to your slums. Welcome to the system of racism, white supremacy. 400,000 men lost their lives in the First Punic War. It's estimated that around 40,000 perished during the First Crusade. Again, this is white people trying to be religious, going around killing everything in the name of God. These people are not religious. These people, they are religious. They're not spiritual. They're very good at organizing people based on spirituality, religion. That's what religion is. It's administrating and organizing spirituality for your purpose, which for white people is control. 80,000 in the Mongol conquests. This doesn't include civilians. When you throw them in the mix, at least a few 100,000. Now in the 20th century, there were 8 major wars. The Sino-Russian War, World War I, the Spanish Civil War, World War II, the Cold War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Bosnian Wars. I listed all the wars in order. And all the wars are connected to each other if you want to do a little research and really get a thorough understanding as to how all these wars connected and why they were fought. Just Google and start reading. I think it would be very valuable for any black person to take time to do this. Focusing on fear. Because the common theme in all of these wars, number one, white people were the cause of all these conflicts. They were at the heart and center of everything. And number two, that there is an underlying fear within white people which motivates and moves them even to war. This is a constant. So if you wanted to study these wars, I would encourage you to look for that. The fear element inspiring white people to be violent. World War I was fought because of the fear and mistrust that ran rampant on the European continent amongst its leaders. The soil was ripe for war. There was the arms race started by Germany, the complex alliances, and the conflicts in the Balkans. The conflicts in the Balkans. This was in the 1900s. Would explode again in the 90s. This is what was known as the Bosnian War. Massive genocide all over the place. White people just going crazy. But see how everything is connected? We're talking about conflict in the Balkans as being part of the reason why World War I was started. And you can fast forward 100 years later, almost anyway, and the same tensions are still there and were the result of the Bosnian War. These wars were all connected. Without getting too far into the weeds, there were a network of complex alliances that obligated countries to take military action if an ally were attacked. So it's in this environment you get World War I. World War II was an extension of World War I. Again, German aggression was at the center of European nations' concerns. Hitler was annexing everything. It was a major land grab, folks. It was white people looking to expand. What Hitler did was no different than Manifest Destiny and the crackers here in the United States, expanding west. Oh, it's our right to expand. We're white. Get these niggers out of here. Get these natives out of here. These Indians. They're savages. They're not humans anyway. Make them walk 2,000 miles or however many miles they had to walk during the Trail of Tears to their deaths. These people are worthless. This is white people. Hitler was saying the same thing. Go back and do your research. Hitler wanted to be equal or surpass the United States in power. That was his underlying motivation. He knew that for Germany to be this kind of a power, Germany needed land, resources. This was the whole motivation for German expansion, which caused World War II. And you need to know this, because what I'm saying is that we should not look as black people, we should not look at them as Nazis. Okay? This is part of what I call refinement. White people hiding their culpability collectively. They were Nazis, they were Germans, but for black people's purposes, I should say, they were white people. And Hitler's expansion was no different than white people's expansion here in the United States in the 19th century. Maybe that was the 18th century. I don't know. But do your research. You get the point. So World War II was an extension of World War I. Now, the Cold War never resulted in an actual war between its primary principals, the United States and the Soviet Union, Russia. But a couple of proxy wars were fought because of it. The Korean War and the Vietnam War, to mention a few. Now, both of these wars were fought to stop the spread of communism. World War II was fought to stop the spread of Nazism. Hold there. There's always some threat with white people. There's always them stopping. Oh, we have to stop this. We have to stop communism. We have to stop terrorism with Nazism. We have to extend ourselves. You know, this is Hitler talking. We have to extend ourselves because it's our right. And because if we don't take to the hands of power in the world, then everything will be destroyed, because only us white people are capable of running the world in any kind of constructive, efficient way. So we need to spread and take control of everything. Only white people think like this. But it's always fear. It's always fear that underlies what they're doing, their actions. It's fear. They are operating out of fear. World War I, one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, had a casualty count of over 16 million human beings. $16 million human beings. Europeans outdid themselves in World War II, as it is estimated that somewhere between 50 to 80 million human beings lost their lives in this conflict. Pause. You need to think about that. 16 million in World War I, 50 to 80 million in World War II. This is approaching 100 million people. Between World War I and World War II alone, you probably had more deaths than all of the ancient wars combined. This is sick. This is white people controlling everything. I'll say it one more time. 100 million people perished between 1913 and the end of the Second World War, 1945. I'll stop there. While you just let those numbers settle in your mind, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to The Barbershop right here on COBRAsInAction.org and the Black Talk Radio Network. Be back. before a problem can be solved, it must be understood. And too many black people do not understand racism. Go to www.COBRAsInAction.org today and learn more about racism and how we can solve this problem. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, C.O.B.R.A number one, and you are listening to the Barbershop here on COBRAsInAction.org and the Black Talk Radio Network. We're talking about war in the system of racism, white supremacy, and I'm going to connect war and racism in just a minute. I'm getting there. But hopefully you are learning some things, and hopefully you're having some fun along the way doing so. All right, so let me ask you this. Why did Osama bin Laden declare war on the West? Everyone talks about, war on terrorism, war on terrorism. Everyone is quick to call people terrorists. But when you look at the conflict, and when you look at it objectively, who started it? And does any group of people, or let me say this, can any group of people call another group of people terrorists accurately? At least in this conflict between the West and radical Islam, as they call it. Okay. Why did Osama bin Laden declare war on the West? I mentioned the Cold War earlier. Okay. Why did Osama bin Laden feel the need to recruit people to take planes and kill so many innocent civilians? I mentioned the Cold War earlier. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan in the 1980s. The Soviets are the Russians that, we know them as the Russians today, looking to maintain the communist regime in the country and counter the West, mainly the United States. Just as the Americans invaded Vietnam, looking to prop up the capitalist regime in Vietnam. Both failed, by the way. In the 80s, bin Laden was a friend of the United States. We provided the United States, because I didn't provide anything, and neither did you, but the United States provided weapons and training to his cause, which was to get rid of the Soviets. His cause was in agreement with U.S. interests at the time. How ironic then that the same reason he fought against the Soviets, which was to stop Soviet expansion, was also the same reason he would declare war and fight against the U.S. a decade later. Imperialism. You see, folks, bin Laden was aware of the history of white people. How wherever they have gone, they have been destructive, and this is why he fought. We can't lose that point. There is a reason why people do things. First Gulf War. Saddam Hussein became really aggressive, invaded Kuwait. This was our excuse to get over into the Middle East, not just to push him back, but to stay, to keep our forces in Saudi Arabia, to keep our forces in the Arabian Peninsula. And this is what Osama bin Laden and people like him objected to, because they were well aware of white people's track record of meddling. Once they get somewhere, they don't just stay. They tend to spread out. By any means necessary. Soft power, war, propaganda, whatever. Word of mouth. White people are spreading their ideas. They can't just stay in one place. They have to slowly take control of everything, because these people are fearful and they do not trust non-white people. This is their MO. This is how they've always acted. You need to understand this. And once you understand this, you will begin to understand racism, white supremacy. Like I said, bin Laden was aware of the history of white people. However they have gone, they have been destructive. And this is why he fought. Present in all of these wars, since the Civil War at least, has been racism. Racism in the Civil War shouldn't need any explaining. The South fought to keep their way of life by enslaving black people and treating black people as non-human, which is the way we are treated right now in 2016. Racism is the belief in the superiority of one race over all other races. In both world wars, white people ran ravage all over Africa. A people that had no direct involvement with any of the reasons that led to conflict on the European continent. So why did Europeans march and fight with their armies all over Africa in World Wars I and World War II? Did European powers ask permission of Africa during the fighting of these wars? Did Rommel, Hitler's best general, nicknamed the Desert Fox, did he seek permission from niggers to conduct warfare in their villages and towns? Did Rommel go to the Africans and say, "Oh, please, great African chiefs. Oh, please, great African leaders. Can we use your land to conduct our war of destruction against other white people we are having disagreements with?" Did he do this? How about the great racist white hero Patton, General Patton, the great Christian, the great war hero? Did he seek any blessings from African peoples to wage war on their land, to involve their populations and bring about all kinds of heartache and suffering amongst the population? No, he didn't, because niggas don't have any rights that a white man is bound to respect. Pretty much all of the African continent had been colonized by all of the major European powers fighting at this time. So Africans had no say whatsoever. Just as they really don't now. None of us. Let me say this. You are African. If you have what they call black skin, if you are what white people consider black, you, my friend, are an African. I am sick and tired of all this confusion and black people classified as black, not just keeping it plain, keeping it simple. You are from Africa. The way in which people have identified themselves all throughout human history is by the land they are associated with. Hitler was a European. George Patton was a European. White Americans are Europeans. You are an African. The land in which you are associated with and which you have been associated with through your ancestors for thousands and thousands of years is very, very influential in shaping who you are. That's why it's important to identify yourself by the land. Don't get confused with how Europeans do it. The way in which they brand people, in quotations, is confusing, and it does not explain who they are. Calling some white person an American is confusing. It can throw you completely off on your analysis of why so-called Americans, white people, act the way they do. And you miss the connection between white Americans and other white people all around the world. But when you say Europeans, this is their starting point. This is where they all come from. And when you look at the history of Europe going back to the Ice Age, now we can see, how these people may have been shaped and why they're so damn violent and exclusive and fearful. All right. So it's very important to identify people by the land from which they come, because the land shapes us. Very important. The Cold War. Two white people fighting for supremacy, using non-white people to fight their proxy wars. How many African leaders were forced to choose between capitalism and communism? How many lost their lives for making the wrong choice? What happened to Patrice Lumumba? What happened to Patrice Lumumba? Look it up. How many Vietnamese lost their lives? How many Afghanis lost their lives because of disagreement between crackers? Racism is white supremacy, meaning it doesn't matter how many non-white people lose their lives because they are inferior and don't really matter. Their concerns are neither here nor there because they are not white. In the war on terrorism, bin Laden requested that the United States leave the Arabian Peninsula after it stopped Saddam Hussein's aggression in the First Gulf War. But the United States decided not to go anywhere because it wanted to maintain close watch on all the oil in the region. Because if anyone else had access to this oil, more influence over this oil, it was going to be a problem. It was a source of fear. Oil, very instrumental in our daily lives, and only good white cracker Christians needed to be in control and have influence over this critical resource because they're so godly. They do what's in all of our interests. Yeah. They're so smart. Smart little wasps. Good little wasps. So they had to have control. Again, bin Laden didn't want the United States to stay in the region because white people, not Americans, not French, not white people, have been like a cancer to entire cultures and people's lives throughout history. Bin Laden didn't want the West meddling in his part of the world. That's all it was. You see, this is not about propping up anybody. This is not about saying, bin Laden was he was a freedom fighter. No, because you look at the history of Arabs, they have acted kind of like white people. Not to the same extent, but they have definitely gone around, terrorized people, enslaved people. Before the Atlantic slave trade, the Arabs were the big slave traders, and they enslaved a lot of Africans. All right, this is way before the Atlantic slave trade. And I myself, I'm going to have to get up on that history, but there was a major slave trade before the Atlantic slave trade. And that was the Arab slave trade, in which they enslaved a lot of Africans themselves. If you look at some of the writings of some of these of ISIS, what are they calling for? The enslavement of non-Muslims. You see this tendency to look at certain human beings as non-human. If you are enslaving someone, calling someone a dog, you are not looking at that person as a human. So this is not any kind of attempt to praise bin Laden or nothing like that, because this man had no intentions of doing good for people as a whole. Okay, but I am pointing out that his issue with white people was essentially racism, white supremacy. This idea that we can go around and do whatever we want because we're white and you just really don't matter. All right, that's what I'm pointing out. See, because white supremacy, if you as a non-white person, if you have any kind of objection to the expansion of white supremacy, to the maintenance of white supremacy, to the establishing of white supremacy. I don't think white supremacy has to be established anywhere anymore because it's all over the planet. But if you have any kind of objection to anything white people are doing, their attitude is, shut up, nigger. Just like what they said to bin Laden, shut up, you desert rat nigger, and shine my shoes. See, this is white supremacy, folks. White people disregarding anyone else's interests in favor of their own, because again, non-white people do not have rights or concerns or interests that a cracker is bound to respect. Let's bring it home. In the beginning of the show, I asked the innocent question of what happened? Why more deaths in the 20th century wars than all other centuries combined? White people is what happened. White people being in control of everything and shaping the world into their worldview. This is what happened. Okay? White people have been very good at organization and convincing people they should be in charge. Okay? Once they get in charge, whether it be by force or by convincing large groups of people that, they're the most religious and that they are sons and daughters of God, whatever. But once they get in charge, they know how to exploit in their own interests. White people are very clever. And see, I hear a lot of black people say things like, oh, well, they're not really that smart, and they're not superior. Fool, wake up. If this were a wrestling match, you would be pinned to the mat and a white person would be on top of you, because white people are on top of everyone. In 2016, they are superior in everything, in all forms of human activity. You see, a lot of you read Nelly Fuller, but you don't have enough courage to say and understand exactly and completely what he's saying. The man is saying racism, white supremacy is a system. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, racism, white supremacy is a system. It does not sleep. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's ongoing. So that means, at any given moment, it's not a situation where at any given moment, you can have racism over here on this part of the planet, and then it leaves there and goes to this part of the planet, and then it leaves there and it goes up north, and then it leaves north and it goes south. That's not how it works. Racism, white supremacy is constant. It never stops. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't take breaks. Highlight, focus, emphasis, white supremacy. If that phrase upsets you, use all that anger and that motivation to do something about your predicament. Don't get mad at me for pointing out what is going on, because accuracy is most important here. Black people are too confused, and this is the reason why we don't do anything, because we don't know that there's anything to be done. We are the most confused people on this planet, in my estimation. And a lot of that is due to refinement and in you believing, not even in you believing, but in you pushing aside the truth, which is that you are subjected to white people. Racism, white supremacy. Not a black supremacy, not a Chinese supremacy, not an Arab supremacy. You look at the count of nuclear warheads on the planet today. The United States alone has enough nuclear warheads to destroy the world 10 times over. Racism, white supremacy. When you look at the GDP, white people collectively account for over 60% of the GDP. These are the smallest, they have the smallest numbers of people on the planet, but yet they control well over half of all the of the GDP. Racism, white supremacy. When you look at the aircraft carriers, a symbol of military power and might, the United States, within a 24-hour period, can touch any other group of people on the planet. Now, remember earlier when I said it's very, very important to not look at white people as Americans, Germans. No. So I say the United States has the ability to touch anyone within a 24-hour period. Don't look at them. Don't look at, oh, Americans can do this. No, white people, because white people are working in the interest of themselves. White people. You are just in their system. And to the extent that you can be used for your work, your talents or whatever, they use you. Okay? So all you niggas going up here getting degrees, trying to talk white, looking to assimilate with white people and be good little passive niggers and get your check every 2 weeks and get your little trinkets. Yes, because, you know, you want to ride around in your Mercedes Benz and you want to talk really proper and use the King's English because you don't want to be like the riffraff. You don't want to be like the niggas that come from the community from which you more than likely come from. No, you want to be refined and you want to be civilized. Civilized according to white people, that is. And you want to eat your scone at Starbucks. And you want to drink your $10 cappuccino at Starbucks. And when you go into white academia, you want to accept all their faggot philosophers as knowing and having all of the truth in regards to how we should live. Socrates, he was so great. Plato, he was so great. These people were sitting around funneling the buttholes of little boys, and they're still teaching this crap in major white academic institutions all over the world. These men were pedophiles. Thomas Jefferson. Him and what was the woman? What was her name? Hold on. Give me 1 second. The name of the lady that Thomas Jefferson victimized. So was it Sally Heming? Hold on. Yeah. I think it was Sally Heming. Okay. President Thomas Jefferson, Sally Heming. Their relationship. It was so loving. It was so encouraging. A white man raping a black woman. This black woman was not a willing participant in having relations with Thomas Jefferson, the rapist. And yet this European is called a founding father. He's looked up to. This is disgusting. But folks, this is white people being white people. And then black people, niggas, a lot of them are infatuated with this idea that this black woman could capture this white man's heart and tenderize it. opened him up to see that black people are human. Oh, yes. Black people are animals, and Thomas Jefferson saw this through his relations with Sally Heming, which ultimately meant that he accepted black people at some point in his life. I think he even let his slaves go at the end or something like that when he was about to die. Oh, and black people fall for this crap. Sally Heming was a victim. Thomas Jefferson was a criminal. George Washington was a criminal. These men were terrorists, the terrorists of their day. Wearing those tight pants with those funny looking wigs. What kind of faggot stuff is this? And people are following this, thinking that white people are smart and so much better than everyone else. What kind of sick, confused people, men, so-called men, walks around in little tight tutus? Displaying their butts for everyone to see. Highlighting their curves. This is disgusting. Men don't dress like this. These men were sick, raping children. A lot of accounts of white people harming children. And it hasn't stopped. Accounts right now of white people harming black children. Whether it be sexually or through the medical practice, trying new drugs on children, young adults. If you look at the hospitals, the research centers, they're always in the nigger areas. And they're always using poor black people as participants to participate in their crazy experiments because they know niggers are desperate. And they're also going to the HBCUs as well because they know you have a lot of desperate, dumb college nigger kids that need money. So you see, folks, in the beginning of the show, I asked what happened. I'm talking about white people. I'm talking about war and the system of racism, white supremacy. All these things, all the mistreatment from white people, they control everything. They can do this. Their way of doing things excludes people, causes desperation, and leads to violence. Stop following white people. That's the point of this whole entire show. As a matter of fact, it's really the point of this entire series. Understanding racism, white supremacy. Stop following white people. Stop thinking that their ice is colder. Stop thinking that they are inherently better than you and that they have all the answers, because they do not. There was a world that was much better before white people came to be the leaders and in control of everything. All right. These people are not meant, they're not fit to be running the world as they do. That's the end of the show. I hope you all enjoyed it and found it constructive. Please visit COBRAsInAction.org and peopleofthesunpublishing.com. And please purchase our first publication, Racism is White Supremacy. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Instagram. Just go to the social media section at the bottom of our website on COBRAsInAction.org. Last but not least, folks, please donate. This is a very time-intensive, financially intensive endeavor, but articulating racism so that we can counter it is the most important thing any of us can do. So please support this effort. Remember, catch the show every Wednesday and Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. here on the Black Talk Radio Network, and archives of the show are available on www.cobrasinaction.org. This is RG Reed signing off. Until next time, peace.